Hi guys, welcome everyone. My name is Vera and today I'm going to show you how to paint our Fall by the River acrylic painting. So I have a sample right here. However, I put one on a screen for you so you can always refer to this one because it's just going to be easier. But I will be showing you this one every now and then as well. Alright, so before we start, let's quickly go through all our supplies to make sure we have everything that we're going to need for today. First thing you're going to need is a canvas. I am going to be using a fairly small canvas. This is only 8 by 10 inch, but you guys are welcome to go bigger or smaller. It really is up to you. Any size will work. Just make sure you adjust the sizes of your brushes accordingly. So if you go with a larger canvas, you might want to go with the larger brushes. And if you go with a smaller canvas, you might want to go with smaller brushes. I'm going to put it aside for now. Next thing you're going to need is a pencil, and we're not going to sketch a lot here, but we will start with just a few sketch lines. So having pencil would be ideal. If you don't have a pencil, that's not a problem. You can just sketch with your smallest brush and a light paint. So any light color like light blue, yellow, light gray, any light color will do. You can do that for a sketch. It's just starting with pencil is always easier because if you make a boo-boo, a line that you don't like, you can always erase it and redo it. Where with paint, that just doesn't work like that. So, but either way, it's fine, pencil or small brush and a light paint for sketch. Then we're gonna need a paper towel or reusable fabric cloth, whichever you prefer. We're gonna need some water. We're gonna need paint. I'm going to be using a pretty standard set of what we always use, which is student grade acrylic paint primary colors only, which is black, white, blue, yellow, and red. And I'm going to be showing you guys how to mix all of those wonderful colors that you see on this painting from our primary colors. If you prefer to use pre-mixed colors, you're welcome to do that as well. It really is totally up to you. And if you decide to go with pre-mixed colors, you're going to need orange because that's one of the colors we're going to be mixing. You're going to need brown because that's another color that we're going to be mixing. Plus, of course, you still will need yellow, blue, red, and black and white. So primaries plus orange and brown if you decide to go with pre-mixed colors. And of course, we're going to need a couple different brushes. I'm going to be using 3 different brushes here. And I always recommend that you use 3 different brushes. They don't have to be exact same shape and sizes as mine. But 3 brushes that I'm going to be using is large, medium, and small. In my case, my large is not really large. It's more like a medium to medium large because my canvas is fairly small. So there is no need for me to have a truly large brush. But this one is the biggest out of 3. And I'm going to be using it for a large area such as background here, such as some dabbing on a trees here, and the background here. Second brush that you want to have is a medium small or medium depending on the size of the canvas. Again, for such a small size as mine, medium small is great. But if you go any bigger than that, then probably medium brush. And this one, again, we're going to use it for some dabbing, for tree trunks, so anything that's you can't do with this brush because it's too big, and this brush because it's too small, you're going to do with this one. And of course, the most important brush is a small, detailed, pointy brush. This brush is the one that we're going to use for all the fine details on this painting, which we have lots of. So this brush is the most important one. This is what you need to have regardless of the size of your canvas. So small brush, either number 0, number 1, number 2, number 3 will work too, as long as it has a really pointy tip. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for this nice pointy tip. That's what you need. These 2 brushes, you can have any shape and any size, as long as one is bigger, one is smaller. You might find that it's easier working with square brushes, or you may be a team pointy brush and use something like this, which is actually even easier for the trees, for the dabbing on a trees. The pointy brushes like this or rounded brushes are actually even easier and better. So if you have, let's say, both choice of square and pointy brushes, I probably recommend pointy brushes for just the dabbing part. So again, see what you have, use what you have. There's no particular brush you have to use as long as you have a variety, so you can choose what works best for every step. Plus, of course, the important brush, small brush. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much all that we're gonna need for today. Now, just to remind you, this is a video tutorial. It's pre-recorded, it's not live, so you don't have to keep up with this. You can pause it at any point and give yourself enough time for every step. This is the way it's designed for you to do. It's designed for you to pause it because I'm going to be going at my own pace. So you feel free to go at your own comfortable pace. Pause it as much as needed and then just resume whenever you're ready to go. And this video is going to stay on our YouTube pretty much forever. So you're not in rush. You're not missing out if you can't do it today. Do it anytime that works for you. All right, and we're going to move on to our painting. We're actually going to do a little bit of sketching first. So right now, just grab your canvases and grab a pencil. And we're going to start with the sketching. Here's my pencil right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide where my water is going to meet my sky. And I would say it's going to be a little bit lower than the middle. So if, let's say, this is my middle of the canvas, somewhere around here, my area where my water meets my sky is going to be a little bit lower. So I'm going to put a line right here. Now, technically, I don't need it to be this wide because the only area where my sky actually meets my water is right here. So I'm going to add it there and I'm going to erase this. Or you don't have to erase it. If their line stays, it's not a problem at all. But I'm going to erase it so you guys don't get confused by that line. All right. And from here, I'm going to add the riverbank right here. And what's this, towards this side as well. So it's not going to go all the way down. It's going to go on an angle like this, but not all the way down. So I'm going to keep a bit of space and I'm going to add my first riverbank right here. So again, just a line and another one on the other side. That's great. And now I'm going to add the upper part. So the upper part is not going to be flat because there's a little bit of a hill there. It's not very steep, but there's a little bit of a hill. So it's not totally flat either on both sides. So I'm just going to add a slight hill. On both sides. All right, so that's our beginning here. That's our start. Great, and I'm not really going to sketch anything else. This is the only thing that I wanted to sketch. So now that I have this, I'm going to put my pencil and my eraser aside, and I'm going to move to painting. And the first thing that I want to work on is going to be my sky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bit of white, just the brush strokes of white. Then I'm going to add a little bit of a light blue. And then I'm going to add just a smidge of this grayer blue to make it look like there may be some rain coming at some point. So I'm going to grab my biggest brush that I have. I'll dip it in the water. And I'm going to start with some white. I'm going to take some white, quite a generous amount. You see, not just a little bit, but quite a bit. And I'm going to start by adding a couple of horizontal brush strokes, somewhere around here. So keep in mind which area is going to be visible in the end. So there's no way for you to go all the way to the left side because this all is going to be hidden, and it's actually best if you don't go that far. However, you don't want to stop too soon either, because then you may have a little gap. So if you don't go far enough with your leaves, you may have a bit of gap of just white canvas, and we want to avoid that. So go far enough that your leaves slightly overlap your sky in the end. Right, so I'm gonna dip my brush in the water again, refill my brush with paint, and add a bit more white. So do you see how much white I made? I'm actually gonna tilt my canvas in a second just to show you guys on a glare how much white I'm adding, because it's hard to see white on white, but if I do the glare you can see it better. Great, so that's my white on white. Now I'm gonna move on to my next two colors right away. I kind of need to get this done before this white dries, so it's much easier to blend. So now that I have this, I'm gonna dip my brush in the water. I'm gonna scoop some white on the side, and to this white I'm gonna add the tiny little smidge of blue, maybe a little bit more. Mix it up, and you see it created a nice light blue. It's not like a super light, it's not a baby blue, but it's fairly light. It's definitely on a lighter side. And what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start by coloring in the top, the very top part that I haven't colored, that doesn't have white yet. And then I'm going to start flicking a brush stroke here and there as I go down. And you don't have to go all the way down. You can leave the bit of space here completely white, and you don't have to blend any of this. I mean, if you want to blend a little bit, just add a couple more going back and forth, but you don't have to blend. If it's brush strokey, that's okay here. We're not going to see much of it. However, again, if it's your personal preference to blend, do that. And I want to mention something right away, guys. If you want to have your edges done, it's always easiest to do them as you go. That way you don't have to mix your paint again and go paint your edges after we're done. It's gonna take you a little bit longer if you do them, but again, it's easier that way, so you don't have to mix the paint. However, if you prefer not to do your edges, that's totally fine. It's not a requirement. I just personally, it's a pet peeve of mine, I don't like unfinished edge, so I always recommend that you finish your edges. That way when you hang your painting, it looks really, really good from every angle, and it just gives it more polished and finished look, and it just looks more professional. The other option, if you not a big fan of doing your edges as you go because it takes extra time, and maybe this is your first painting in a while or ever, and you just don't feel up to it, you can always do that in the end and either color match, so basically mix every color again and just do whatever is happening on this side when you come to the edge, add it on the edge, or you can choose just one color present on your painting and paint your edges with that. So again, you don't have to do it right away. That's not your way of doing things, but I do want to mention it before we get too far, in case this is something you wanted to do. So if you do want to color match your edge as you go, what you'll be doing is that whenever you get to the edge of your painting, whatever you brought to the edge, you're going to be painting the edge with. So that way you're almost extending your image over the edge of your canvas. So this is pretty much what you would be doing. Again, just giving you guys an option. All right, and once we have these two colors, so we're going to move to our third one, which is going to be like a grayer color. So for me, I'm going to make a little bit more blue because I almost ran out. And you see I made it just like a tiny little smidge darker. And then to this color, I'm going to add just a tiniest little smidge of black. So do you see how little? Like a tiny corner. You don't want to add any more than that. Even this, do you see it gave it a distinct gray undertone? If you add any more than that, it's going to take over. Black is very dominant color. So you only need the tiniest little smidge of it to give more of a stormy gray look to something. If you add a bit more, it's going to overtake it and it's just going to be very dark. So just a tiny touch, and with this tiny touch, I'm going to blend this on a very top. And you see what it did? It just gave it that stormy undertone. It didn't change it dramatically. Of course, if you want to have a super stormy day, you could go darker. But in that case, I would suggest that you darken up your paint by using blue and black, not just black. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. You see I blended that a little bit as well. After this, I'm gonna go on my bottom while I still have this paint, and I'm gonna use the stormy color. So let's see, I'm gonna maybe take a little bit more white and water it down a little bit. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a couple of brush strokes right here. Yeah, I know it looks kind of dark, but we're gonna deal with that in a second. So as soon as you have it, you're gonna wash off your brush, dab it off on a paper towel, and you're gonna grab straight white, and quite a bit of it. And with straight white, you're gonna smudge it, and you're gonna make it a little more muted and a little more light. So do you see I'm kind of smudging it into the background with my white. Great. And now I'm just gonna leave it, I'm gonna let it be, and I'm not gonna touch it for the next little while. Next thing that I would like to move on to is gonna be my leaves. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a first layer of that yellow. Do you see how our background has a nice yellow as a base here? So this is what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to add that nice little yellow as a base, and I'm also going to flick some from the bottom here. So what we're going to do, we're just going to make nice light yellow. I'm going to continue using the biggest brush that I have, but if it's easier for you, you can switch to a medium brush or any brush that you find best for your size of canvas, but generally I would recommend something on a bigger size, on a bigger side. So I'm going to start by scooping some white on a side. I'm going to put it right here. Now to this white, I'm just going to add some yellow, and that is it. It's just a mixture of yellow and white, nothing else. And now with this mixture of yellow and white, I'm gonna start dabbing here. So my goal is to dab pretty much this section right here. So you can start from the bottom, you can start from the top, it doesn't matter at all. I personally always prefer to start from the bottom. And I'm going to be overlapping my blue as I go up. So now something to keep in mind. In my case, my blue is dry enough. It's not fully dry, like as you can see, it still smudges a little, but it's dry enough that when I add yellow over it, it doesn't pick up that blue and start mixing into green. So if you have a thicker layer and you start picking up and you start dabbing your yellow and you realize that instead of leaving yellow on your canvas, it actually picks up your blue and it mixes all that into green, I would say leave it. Let it dry for a little bit longer. The good thing working from the video tutorial is that you got all the time. It's not live, you don't have to keep up with the speed. Just let it dry. Let it dry a little bit longer. If you have a hair dryer nearby, you can grab a hair dryer and just blow dry it. Or you can grab your canvas and do this. It actually, such a silly little thing, but it does help it dry much faster. So you can do that too. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, if it's still a little bit wet, but your paint stays on when you put it on, and it doesn't blend into green, it doesn't pick up that blue and start mixing with it, then it's totally fine to continue. You don't have to take the drying time. Drying time is only if it mixes into green, in which case it's important that you take some drying time. So do you see, I dabbed this quite solid, but this edge I dabbed quite transparent. So how you do that is you don't use too much paint. You want to use up lots of the paint, all the fresh paint. Every time you refill your brush, you go onto this area and you dab it up so that your brush gets rid of the majority of paint. And with whatever little bit you have left, you go right here and you add that transparent dab line. So by basically lightly tapping your canvas, do you see? If I push hard, it will still give me quite a thick line, but if I'm just lightly tapping it, it gives me that super nice and transparent and fluffy line, and that's what you want here. Now, another thing to keep in mind, if you're using square brush, you want to keep it super flat. If you're using a pointy brush, so for example like this, a rounded or pointy brush, you can do actually on a point like this. So just a little tip for you. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side as well. Awesome. And again, for those of you who want to do your edges, feel free to bring all of this onto your edge. For those of you who don't do your edges, that's okay. You don't have to do that. All right, and now using the same brush, I'm gonna bring a little bit of this color on the very bottom. So now I'm gonna flick it from my banks, river banks, towards the middle. So I'm gonna start here. I'm gonna bring it from the outside in. Make sure you're using a fairly light yellow here, so you don't want to use a full strength yellow. You definitely want to use yellow mixed with white. I'm going to flick it from the outside in. And again, you always want to start from here to here, so from the left to the right, because whenever you refill your brush, you still have quite a bit of paint, and you want the area that's closest to the bank be the most solid area. And then you want it to get wispy and more transparent as you go towards the middle. So start from the side and just flick it towards the middle. And of course, if you're doing your sides, don't forget about them. Notice I go pretty far with this. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. All right, that's my yellow base. Now next color I'm gonna move on to is going to be orange. So let's mix it, and I'm gonna continue using the same brush for now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a bit more white. I'm actually gonna mix it on the same spot. Then I'm gonna add some more yellow. So white and yellow, but this time more yellow. Do you see it's more saturated and less white? And then I'm gonna add just a little bit of red. You don't need much red to make orange. You don't need equal parts of red and yellow either, because red is more dominant color. So if you add equal parts, it's going to overtake it and it's going to turn almost red. You always need less red than yellow to make orange. So it's always a good idea to start adding red little by little, smidge by smidge. So add a smidge, mix it, see if it turns into the color you'd like it to turn. If not, add another smidge, mix it, and just continue doing that. And that smidge of white that we added originally will just soften it up a little bit. So it's not going to be a harsh, almost neon orange. It's going to be a little bit softer, a little bit more pastel orange, but still orange. All right, now this I think is the right color for me. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in this whole thing. So again, I'm going to dab it. You can color it in too, doesn't matter. Sometimes I would color it in with like brush strokes because it's easier, and then dab it on top for texture, because I do want it to have that dabby texture versus the linear brushstroke texture. But coloring it in with brush strokes is generally just faster. So a lot of the times I'll take that shortcut and then just, you know, dab up the dabby texture on top. That way I do it faster and make sure, because when you do it, when you just color it in with brush strokes, it actually covers better as well. So you make sure you don't have any white canvas coming through. But then I would like to add that dabby texture by just going over it a little bit. So once you have that, I'm going to extend that on the top a little bit. So do you see? I'm not refilling my brush. I'm just using whatever I have left on the brush. Oh, and even, you know, dragging a little bit of paint from the bottom to the top. If you need to, if you don't have any paint left, you can totally refill your brush with paint. It's not a problem. But for example, like I'm doing right now, but don't start right here now. Start on already orange area and then drag it down, drag it up a bit. That way, again, you're gonna end up with that more transparent upper edge, which is what we were looking for. We're looking for more transparent upper edge. We don't want to have a solid line. And I'm just going to continue bringing it up a little bit higher, but super, super transparent. All right, that's good. And of course, if you're doing this, if you're doing your sides, bring it onto your sides as well. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing on this little right side. All right, and now I'm gonna flick a little bit. So the same way that we did with light yellow, we're gonna flick with orange. The only difference, we're not gonna go as far. And a little bit on the other side as well. Alright guys, and now we're gonna go redder. So what we're gonna do is we're going to use the same brush, almost the same paint. I actually don't have any more, so I'm going to make more. So again, yellow, just a tiny smidge of white and red, but this time use more red than the previous time. So you're looking for more saturated red or orange. So do you see? This is what it looks like. And I'm going to grab not a lot of this one. And I'm going to start adding second layer, but with this one, I'm not going to go as far down. I'm going to give area, I'm going to leave a little area uncovered here, and I'm not going to go as far up. So I'm going to start somewhere right here. This is where I want to start and have it quite solid. And then I'm going to spread it a little bit up. And I'm going to spread it a little bit down. But notice I'm not going all the way to the bottom. And of course, if you are doing your edge, don't forget about your edge. I'm gonna do the same thing here. Great. I will go with this color and do flicks, but I'm not gonna start them. So this area, I'm gonna leave uncovered. So my flicks, I'm gonna start somewhere around right here. So I'm just gonna add a couple flicks in this color too. Use only a little bit of paint. You don't want too much paint, and you can even switch to a smaller brush here if you prefer. It doesn't have to be the smallest one, but just you can go, let's say instead of large you can go medium maybe, or you can continue with large. Either is fine. It's whatever works for you really. And again, for those who are doing the edges, don't forget about your edges. Wonderful. And the last color that I want to add into the mix is going to be a darker brown. So I'm actually going to switch my brush for this one, and I'm going to go actually let's stay with this brush for this area, and then I'm going to switch it. So I'm going to go for a brown now. I'm not going to add any white, so I'm just going to take yellow, red, I'll say about equal parts of yellow and red. And you see it almost looks red, and that's normal. And no white this time. And I'm going to add a little bit of black. Maybe a little bit more. So do you see it turn into a nice, let's say medium brown. I might go a little bit darker than this. Oh yes, that's a good color. So I'm going to take just a little bit of that. So not a brush full. And I'm going to start dabbing in about the same areas that I did this darker orange. So I'm going to start dabbing here. We're not trying to have a full coverage. Do you see how nice and transparent I'm doing this? This is what you want. You want to have more of a transparent coverage. So lightly dabbing it up. So pretty much the same areas that I added darker orange. I'm doing my edge as well. Now I'm going to switch my brush. So I'm going to wash off this brush. I'll put it aside. And I'm going to grab my small brush. Sorry, not the smallest one, but the small R one. I'm going to take a bit more brown, and I might even dab a little bit more solid, like right here, just like the very middle of this. I'll dab here as well. All right, and now I'm gonna continue on to the bottom. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna flick from the edge into the water, pretty much all around. Just don't go as far as you used to go with other colors, because you don't want to color them fully. If some of it gets covered up, that's okay, but you don't want to cover everything up, right? And a little bit on the other side as well. All right, and then I'm gonna dab up this edge. So right here where our water meets our land, I'm gonna dab it up. Empty my brush a little bit. So it just doesn't look like, you know, a solid line, so it looks more fluffy. All right, that's great. And now we're ready to start on our black. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to position my tree trunks. So I'm going to start with my large tree trunks, and then I'm going to move to my small tree trunks. So for my large ones, I'm going to use the same medium small brush. You can use just the small brush too. It's just going to take a little bit longer, so whatever works for you. And I'm going to water down my black just a little bit. And that's not for the color. I'm not trying to make it transparent. I just want to make sure it's nice and liquid. And I'm going to start with my biggest tree here. So it's going to be positioned somewhere right here. So not on the very edge, so maybe here. And I'm just going to start by putting one line. Then after I have this one line, I'm going to thicken it up on the bottom. Because our trees, they grow from the bottom, and the trees, they're always a bit thicker where they grow from. So we're going to make sure to thicken them up closer to the very bottom. Just maybe dab up a little bit lightly on the bottom. Great. Now I'm going to position the rest of my tree trunks. So then I'm going to put one more tree somewhere right here. Same thing, starting with one line, and then I'm going to thicken it up slightly on the bottom. And guys, my paint dries really fast, so I can continue working on it without letting it dry much. If for you, your paint underneath is way too wet, so whenever you're trying to add those trees, it just, you know, the paint doesn't stick, just lifts up what's underneath. You can always let it dry for a little bit. Don't rush through this. And then I'm gonna add 2 more trees in between. All right, so that's my tree trunks. Now I'm gonna switch to my small brush, and the rest I'm gonna do with my small brush. So I'm gonna wash this one off, dab it on a paper towel, put it aside, and I'm gonna grab my small brush. And I'm gonna take more of my black that's watered down, again, for the reason of being liquid enough for me to make fine lines. And I'm gonna start adding branches. So always, always, always add your branches from the tree trunk and bring them out. So you want to push on your brush a little bit harder where you start your branch, and then you slowly let go as you go further. That's how you get the branch that's thicker on the bottom and thinner at the end. And we're going to add quite a few of those, as many as you want. Okay, that's my one tree. And you see I added large branches and then a couple smaller branches as well. I'm gonna add a couple branches to the rest of my trees as well, because all of them need to have a branch or two, or however many you want really. There's no set amount of branches that they have to have. And of course I'm going to extend all this onto my edge, since I decided to do my edge this time. All right, I think that's good for my larger trees. And then I'm gonna start, or maybe one more branch. Yeah, that's good. I'm happy now. So after this, I'm gonna move on to my smaller trees. So behind there on the hill line that we originally sketched, I'm gonna add a whole bunch of smaller trees. And again, I'm gonna start by just adding tree trunks, and then I'm gonna add some branches. And all the tree trunks we're gonna do from the bottom up. So just keep in mind that line. And some of them can be more straight, some of them can be more curved, but generally I like to give them some sort of shape so they're not just all straight. The same with those branches. Notice how all the branches are slightly wavy and curved and long. You're not doing just like a little stubby short branches. You're doing nice and long branches. Alright, so I added quite a few tree trunks there, and now I'm going to add some branches to them. Alright, that's great. And I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna add a couple tree trunks, the small ones, and then branches. All right, and now I'm gonna wash off my small brush. I'll dab it on a paper towel and I'll put it aside, and I'm gonna grab my medium brush, and I'm gonna grab a bit of that watered down black, and I'm gonna add the lines here again. So I'm gonna darken up the entire edge. So you can even start by just putting one line like this, if it's easier, or you don't do that, it's totally fine if you don't. And then from that line we're gonna flick some. So do you see, I darkened up the whole line, and there will be some areas where I'm gonna flick further, just a few maybe, but generally you want to keep it pretty close to the line. And the same thing on the other side as well. And then going right over that line, I'm gonna dab it up a little bit. I'm not even refilling my brush with paint at all. I'm just going over it with whatever little bit I have left to get rid of that linearness. You want to get rid of that straight line, right? You don't want to have that straight line. And you see, in my case, you can still see brown. So what we did the same with brown, you can still see both. You can still brown, but you can still see black a little bit lower than my brown. That's what you want ideally. If you lost your brown, it's not a big deal at all, but ideally you want to see both of them. So guys, what we need to do now is actually we're gonna need to let it dry, because we can't do anything with it until our black dries. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna pause this video. My black dries extremely fast, so it shouldn't take me more than 5 minutes probably. So I'm gonna pause this video. I'm gonna let my black dry, and I suggest you do the same. And if you're generally working slower than me, and maybe you've already paused this video a couple times, your black might be already dry. So in which case you can just continue working on it. But in my case, it's still super wet. So I'm gonna need to pause the video to let it dry up a little bit. So I'm gonna do that, and I will see you guys very shortly. You probably wouldn't see the difference. For you, it will feel like this, and we'll be back. Alright guys, and my black is almost dry. It's not fully dry. There's still a couple spots that are wet, but mostly it is dry. So I'm gonna move on to my next color, which is gonna be my orange again. So this time I'm just not gonna be adding any white to it, or if you want to add white, just a very minimal amount. And ideally I would recommend using a pointy brush or rounded brush if you have it. So I'm gonna start with my yellow, scoop it on the side, and then I'm gonna add just a little bit of red and mix nice, fairly light orange. So you don't want it super bright, but just like a nice orange. And with this orange, again, you're welcome to mix in a little bit of white, just don't mix in too much white. And with this orange, I'm gonna start dabbing over my branches, but also certain areas that I assume would be branches. Okay, so do you see? I'm dabbing in like a groups of dabs. So I'm gonna dab over this branch, and notice what I'm not doing. What I'm not doing is I'm not dabbing all along the branch. That's a no-no. What you want to do is you want to dab like a section closer to the end of your branch. So I'm gonna dab them on the ends of my branches where I can see the ends. And don't avoid your tree trunks, go right over them. And you see now I dabbed on the ends of my branches, but I still have lots of sort of empty areas. So just decide and dab a couple more groups of dabs. So the same kind of groups of dabs, just a couple more areas. So we'll put one right here maybe. One right here. And of course I'm gonna bring all that to the edge, wherever it comes to the edge of my canvas. And then I'm gonna dab onto the tips of my smaller trees on the back. So the same way. And you see they almost have like a little wispy pointy end. So they're sort of almost like slightly horizontal, I would say. So if those previous dabs I went right over my trees, this one's for the back trees. I'm gonna try to avoid the tree trunks, the big tree trunks. If you get a little bit over them, it's not a big deal at all, but generally don't just go right over them. Try to work around them. And of course I'm going to add a little bit of that on the other side too. Great, and then you're gonna grab a bit more of this color, only if you want to, this is optional, and you can add a bit more on your bottom, but you don't have to start from black. You can start where the black ends, and again, super optional, only if you really want to. And then I'm gonna add second layer, which is gonna be just beautiful red. So I'm gonna grab some of my red, and I'm gonna take just a small smidge of yellow and add into it. You don't have to do that. The only reason why I'm doing it, because my red generally it comes a bit more on the pink side, so it's like a dark pink versus like a fire truck red, and I would prefer it to be more of a fire truck red. So this is the only reason why I'm adding a tiny smidge of yellow. And with this red, I'm gonna go right over the areas that I did orange, and I'm gonna dab some right in the middle, but less. So do you see? I'm not covering the whole section with the red. I'm just dabbing a bit of red in the middle of my orange. And this one, do not add any white into. Just straight red, either red with a little bit of yellow in or orange in case you need to adjust the shade of your red. All right, that looks pretty good. We'll add a couple of random brush strokes too. All right, and with this red, I'm definitely gonna add a couple smidges on my water. Maybe I'll even add a bit of red right here. You don't have to, but you could. And now the other two colors that I would like to add here is a little bit of brown on top. So if you still have a bit of brown, you can just grab whatever you have left. You don't need much, and don't grab a lot on your brush. You want to have almost dry brush. And with this dry brush, I'm just gonna bring some right on top here. Just gonna dab up a little bit the upper line. It's just the very top. So I'm dabbing that up very lightly. You see it's still see-through. And then I'm gonna dab a couple dabs going down. The only thing that's important here is that you make sure they're see-through. So make sure you only have a little bit of paint on your brush. If you have too much, it's gonna be very blobby, and that's not the goal here. The goal here is to have it just add an additional layer to your background and not cover it up fully. And of course you can add a bit of that underneath your trees, but only if you want to. Again, you can just leave that alone. You don't have to do that. And then I'm gonna make light yellow again, and I'm gonna highlight the sections right here. So I'm gonna take some yellow, mix it with just a little bit of white. And the brush you would be using for this is anything close to medium. So any medium-ish, medium large, medium small, any shape. But again, ideally if you have a pointy shape, that's great. If not, square shape will work just as well. It doesn't matter. And we're gonna dab up this section. So you're gonna start by putting a bit more solid line closer to this middle part. And then you can spread it up just a little bit. Do you see how I got rid of extra paint on my paper towel? So my brush got emptier and drier. And now I'm gonna spread it up a little bit. And spread it down a little bit too, to maybe even overlap a bit that black edge that we created earlier. And I'm gonna do something very similar on the other side as well. Alright, awesome. And then I'm gonna move on to my white. So what I'm gonna do is using my medium small brush, so this one, medium brush, I'm gonna grab some straight white, and I'm gonna go right here, and I'm gonna add a whole bunch of horizontal lines with just my straight white. Some of them are gonna be longer, some of them are gonna be shorter. Just highlighting this area. And then using the same brush, let's add a little bit of white, but now you take away less of it, and you're just gonna dab up a bit of white to highlight the middle of this light yellow section, but only use a little bit of yellow. So you don't, sorry, not yellow, a little bit of white. You don't want to use as much as you used in yellow. Way less. Awesome. Then I'm gonna switch my brush to a small brush. Make sure you wash off your medium brush, put it aside, and grab a small brush. And I'm gonna water down my white a little bit for this as well. And again, not for the transparency, but just for the consistency, so I have a nice and liquid paint. And I'm gonna start by adding a little, almost like a little wiggly line here, right on my black. So not on the edge where orange connects to black, onto the black. And then from there, from the tiny little wiggly sketch line, I'm gonna add a couple horizontal flicks here and there, just like a fully horizontal ones. And of course, if you're doing your, just don't forget to bring some of it onto the edge. So I'm gonna do that on one side, and I'm gonna do that on the other side as well. Maybe I'll add a couple more into the middle of my small brush. And then I'm going to take a little bit more of my white paint and I'm going to add a highlight onto my tree trunks. So you're not going to add it again onto the edge of black, you're going to add it on the actual black. And then the last thing that is left for us, well, almost last thing actually, is to add birds. So I'm just going to add a couple, they're almost like a check marks. Just some of them are going to have wings going up, some of them are going to have wings more open. So it's just the shape of that wing that varies, and have them in all sizes. So for me, I'm going to have a couple smaller ones, then bigger ones, then smaller ones. As many as you want. And of course you want to use the smallest brush for this, and you want to water down your block again to have a nice liquid paint to give you ability to make fine lines. So usually what I do is I start with a dot. I do a dot and then I flick on one side, and then I try to flick something very similar on the other side. So that's one of my birds. Now I'm gonna add a couple more. So again, flick, flick on one side, flick on the other side. And you see some of them have wings a bit more open, some of them have wings a bit more closed. That is totally up to you. Alright, so I have a nice line of birds here. This is enough of birds for me. You can have more or less, totally up to you. And the very last thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to sign it. So I'm going to choose a good spot and I'm going to put my initials there. And I'm going to put them right here at this time. And guys, do you see, because I did my edges as we went, now my painting look like it extends onto the edge of my canvas. Now if you haven't done your edges, if you didn't do them as we went, that's okay. You can always do them now. You can just color match whatever is going on around. Yes, it will involve a bit of mixing, or if you still have all the colors that we use, then no mixing. It's just going to involve a little bit of work. So just you can bring what on the edge, whatever is going on up front. That's option number one. Option number two is you just choose one color present on your painting and you paint all the edges with that. So you can do orange, you can do blue, you can do yellow, you can do black. My personal favorite for that is black, because what it does, it almost makes it look framed. So if you go with black, it's going to make your front more contrast, and when you hang your painting from the distance, it's almost going to look like you have a very thin black frame going around. So if you're a big fan of contrast, that may be the one for you. If you don't like contrast, then it's definitely not for you. So you guys decide. I'm just giving you all the options that are available to you here. And I would say that's pretty much it. We did it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, please do that. We have lots of free, wonderful video tutorials for all kinds of mediums. We have acrylic, watercolor, drawings, and we're adding more every week. And some events are live events. We host live YouTube painting and drawing events, but we also do pre-recorded video tutorial releases just like this one. So you have choice which one you would like to participate in and which one you would like to paint from. If you guys would like to share your results, please do take a photo, and you will see in the description of this video there is a link to a Facebook group. It's a support group that we've created for everyone to share the results from the tutorials they do with us. So you'll find the link in the description of this video. So take a look, and please feel free to go there and post your results. so we and other people who participated in this event can see how it turned out. And that way we can all feel like we're doing it all together, maybe almost like in the same virtual room, right? It's fun. And guys, if you enjoyed it and you want to say thank you by tipping me, I would never say no to that. You're welcome to do that. And tips are always, always appreciated, even though they are not required, just so you know, but they are appreciated. So if you would like to do that, you're welcome to do that as well. You'll find a PayPal link in the description of the video. So when you click on that, choose the option that says send money versus the request money. If you request money, you're actually asking them for me. So choose the option that says send money, and you can tip any amount. And of course, all tips are greatly appreciated. And that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this event, and hopefully we'll get to paint again very soon. Bye, guys.